Training,
ndichikutambirai zvekare pano padzirare 263 pano pachange chikuzivisai manews updates ezvinhu zviri kutsviriridza munyika yedu yezimbabwe. Saka kana uchiri munyowani patirare 263 usubscribe mahara wetena on the notification bell so that patinodzoka neamwe mapost uchange uchingozvionera panapa uchinge uchiwana manews updates ezvinhu zviri kuitika munyika yedu yezimbabwe. Saka kana uchiri munyowani patirare 263 kusubscribe mahara wetena on the notification bell kuitira kuti patinodzoka neamwe manews updates unova uchiona zvinoitira kuti iwewe usasarire panyaya dzema-updates. Uri kunonokereiko? Tiri isu tiri kukasika kumhanya nemanews updates ezvinhu zviri kuitika munyika yedu yezimbabwe. Vhidhiyo randava nezvoro muzora nhasi nofunga vazhinji maona mamilitary tengers achifamba muharare mutown achibva kuKG6. So vanhu vanga vachishaya kuti anga achifambirei ende changa chiri chikonzero chei. Zvisinei chikonzero hanzi ari kutestwa, anotestwa papera time ndo panotanga kutestwa achionekwa kuti ari sei. So vamwe vanhu vanga kuzobuda masocial media vachitaurawo macomment section atareceiva nyaya idzi vachiti kwandi kutesterwa kumadhunduruko kunana Mount Darwin pane kutesterwa mune marobots. Ndo zvachitaurawo vamwe vanhu. Zvisineika pane vhidhiyo futi ari kutendera mastreets esocial media. Vhidhiyo iri pataurwa zvakati wandei ende zvanzi Geza akataura kuti hakuna munhu akahwinha maelection. Zviripo pavhidhiyo. Da kuti munzwe vhidhiyo, wapedza kunzwa vhidhiyo utaura zvaunofika comment section. Ini saatirari regai ndipinde mastreets nditsvage nyaya dzezvinhu zviri kuitika munyika yedu yezimbabwe. Saka subscribe, isai malikes, ndifare ndikasike kudzoka. Ndatinzwei.
Now that if the military takes over, we are likely going to see people, switching allegiance to whoever is going to be the most powerful at that moment. So it's yet to be seen. But if the constitution allows for the General Chiwenga to be the next president, as we wait for the election, yeah.
Well, thanks for that. So do you think there's a problem with the way our constitution is in general? Because if the constitution allows for the army to take over the running of the country at any given point, is this not going to be our future then going forward? Is this not going to be the trajectory of what happens? Because what does democracy look like for us in terms of democracy? Can we actually elect a government? Is it even possible to do that? Because, if people who live abroad, we vote governments in and we vote governments out. Sometimes some governments are terrible, you're against that government, but you'll get a chance to vote them out. Now we have a situation where we're getting ourselves into a habit of one coup after another. Is this something that the constitution allows for? And is that not something that then we should be concerned about trying to correct? Are we ever going to have a democratically elected government rather than coups after another?
It's quite interesting. If you are aware, there is a 2017 High Court judgment, which was, the opposition was challenging the constitutional basis upon which the Mugabe was removed. So they were challenging that 2017 was a coup. But the High Court ruled that Section 212, the military under Section 212 has sort of like a legal basis upon which they can act. So the first item of that constitution says the military can protect the national integrity of Zimbabwe, right? And it can also protect where the president has been surrounded by people who are usurped authority, that is unelected officials usurping constitutional authority of the president. So in this case, now that we have a precedent in the High Court of the cases where the army was deployed and then it took over power, it's quite a dangerous precedent. Unfortunately, the Constitution in its text format, it's a good document. I have no problem with it. But the players who are using the Constitution are not in good standing. Because when you see the army acts as a last line of defense. So when you see the army coming in, it means the other institutions would have lost their authority or power. For example, the parliament looks compromised. The opposition, there's no opposition in the parliament because we saw what Chabangu did when 2 million people were robbed of their voice and contribution in democracy. So now that we don't have a parliament, or we have a rubber stamping parliament that is leaning towards one party state, the next thing that we have is the resistance comes out of the army as a last line of defense. The other aspect of the constitution in 212 says that people who usurp authority without the constitutional basis can be grounds for the army to intervene. And we look at people like Chivayo, or people surrounding the president, Tungwarara, a lot of other people who are, splashing tender money all over, or taxpayers' money all over. Now, this could be grounds for impeachment or, an intervention. I wouldn't like the army to, in future, as a president, to continue doing this. But there seem to be no opposition. There seem to be no other alternative. There seem to be, the only way that can bring change is through that clause. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just giving my submissions. I'm not saying we need a coup. I just think going forward, it's very important that people understand that the judiciary, the police, all the other institutions which are supposed to be protecting the people and ensuring good governance, they're all compromised. So when you see the last line of defense rolling in tanks in the streets, it's a cause of concern that probably the authorities within the army could have seen that the constitution has been, mutilated or bastardized. This again links to the call for 2030, to amend the constitution. So when you try to amend the constitution again, you're simply, stepping upon the wheels of over 50 million people who voted and consented for that constitution. I think the constitution should be the supreme law of the land. It should not be compromised or changed at will. It should remain the ultimate authority or the ultimate voice in all our affairs, political, social, or economical. But now that it has been compromised, again, the last line of defense is the army. So it draws back to what you have asked, and my submission still remains. What's happening is a reaction of all the political discourses that was happening since 2017.
And then the question remains, it's simple this, right? He's got a term until 2028. That's his term. So with the army rolling onto the streets now, we're finding ourselves in a situation where the army is actually in breach of the constitution itself, because he's been elected, and he's been elected for 2 terms. However that happened, we don't like it, but it's the government that's in power and they were duly elected, right? And we know where they are now, but he's got until 2028. What we want to be hearing is that his term ends in 2028. Not the army rolling into the streets now and kind of promising us a new government. That to me is more of a concern than anything else, because he's got another sort of 3 years to complete his term. Why are we so impatient to wait out his term? Because this is going to be, like you said, precedent. We will find ourselves in a situation where if the army is not happy with somebody 2 or 3 years into his term, they will step in, because difficult decisions at some point will have to be made to turn this country around. And if those decisions, whoever is going to be making those decisions at that time, if the army disagrees with what they're doing, the army will then step in. But those people have been duly elected by the Republic of Zimbabwe. And what I'm saying is, I know it may not be a popular opinion, is we need to see the army saying, well, the constitution will be adhered to. But, 2028 is, is 3 years down the line. Should that not be a concern, the fact that the army is actually out on the streets?
Yeah, definitely. I'm quite concerned as a citizen myself, as the president has not finished his term. But we will yet to see under the basis upon which the army will be acting. We are all speculating at this moment that the current deployment is a result of the other faction. We don't know. But if it is out of the result of a faction that is issuing their moves, then they are definitely cutting short the presidential term. We are yet to see the legal clauses or justifications for that. And it's not a good precedent to set. I know there are a lot of governance issues that we are facing, but it could be a very dangerous precedent, as you have said, and I quite agree with you on that one. My only worry is the basis upon which the army is acting. Does it, maybe two questions to you, does it constitute an exponential threat which says we have to do it right now? We cannot wait for the presidential term to end. Does the current status quo, whereby we have the president saying, people saying we need to amend the constitution, and moves are being made in parliament to amend the constitution, does all these political activities amount to an emergency? Does it justify an emergency by the army to say we are stopping it right now? What do you think about that?
Yeah, those are very interesting questions, actually. But yeah, I mean, I know the role of the army obviously is to secure the country against enemies internally and externally. But yeah, we do find ourselves in that kind of situation. My view is that, Mnangagwa should serve his term, as much as I don't like the guy at all. I'm out of the country because of him and regardless of that. But the reality is we are trying to form a government and trying to be a democratic country. So just thinking about that alone, it just means that the power the army has, it just seems to be like it's just too much for an army, because they're there to serve the country rather than to rule us. We're not a military government unless things have changed. But then the other thing that we need to be looking at is the constitution itself. How is the constitution amended? Should it just be amended by politicians themselves, in themselves? Like you said, if they're captured, it's easy to amend it. But should there not be a referendum then, in terms of, if there's any changes to the constitution? Should a referendum not be the way around it, where people actually vote and decide, what the steps are? And securing the role of the army then would be to secure our votes, make sure that our voices are heard, rather than the army then deciding what's within the constitution and what isn't. Because to be fair, the army, they're not legal experts. Their job is to, secure the country, like, we've said, from enemies within and outside of the constitution, so outside of the country. I don't know, but that's where I stand with it. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, we have, look at ZEC, because we mentioned about the referendum. So let's look at ZEC, because the moment we talk about the referendum, the constitutional body that deals with that is the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. It is mandated under the constitution to hold anything to do with public office and elections. So the national discourse or decision making when it comes to elections, ZEC will be responsible for that. But if we look at the composition of ZEC, do we have enough confidence in it as a body that can actually, represent the interests of the people in terms of articulating exactly what the people would have voted for? Can it be a body that is trusted to, publish results that reflect the national sentiments concerning the amendment of the constitution? So these questions are very important, because even if we have a referendum, but people will vote, and then, the elections might be diluted or they tampered with during that referendum, it becomes a problem also. So when I'm saying that institutions of governance having been tampered with, when the moment the public loses confidence in those institutions, it necessitates that, again, the last line of defense, as the army, we will tend to take advantage of that. So there are a lot of questions to ask, because if the public is given a chance to vote in a referendum and they outrightly vote for no, which I think majority don't want the constitution to be amended, how safe is it? Are we guaranteed to get that result published? Right? Because one of the what Geza said in his press conference, he was saying there was no winner in the last election in 2023. So coming out of his mouth saying that there was no winner is kind of like admitting that there was some tampering with the plebiscite, one way or the other. So, yet the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission said there was a winner. So in that aspect, in that regard, it becomes problematic for us to say, let's go to a referendum. I'm standing to be guided on that one. But I feel what is happening here is power moves that started with Geza. You know, when Geza was speaking, he was not arrested. Up to now, he's not yet arrested. So what is happening, I really think that there is some definitely power moves happening here. Like I've said, we have to wait for the next 24 to 48 hours. But my suggestion, especially to opposition parties, the best way maybe the citizens can participate in this without losing their ultimate control in governance is whatever outcome comes out of this factional fights, the citizens has to have a representation. If they're going to come up with a new government, which I'm not saying they're going to do, or a new president, they should definitely include the opposition and civil society organizations. If there's going to be a transitional authority, like what Geza said, there should definitely be opposition political parties involved in the transitional power sharing agreements for maybe up to 3 years until the next term. So regional bodies has to play a role, SADC, African Union, and other international observers. They have to come in and see how the power can be negotiated temporarily as we wait for the next election. And those people in the opposition and in civil society organization should then call for reforms of the major institutions which I've mentioned, starting with ZEC, the media, even the police and the army. So without these reforms, it's going to be an election which is going to be conducted in an even playing field. So we need these reforms for us to start having confidence in the electoral bodies. That's my submission. So what you have asked would be a very good thing if all the bodies were independent and autonomous. But now that they are not independent, they are not autonomous, when we are simply submitting our voice or our votes to a captured organization or institution, it's a problem for us to rely on it. And my question is, what should happen then? Let's say there's a new president. How do you think the opposition or the other organizations should take part? Should they be included in a transitional authority if it is one, or they should not be included, or they should? It's just winner take it all, right? I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, my take is that if an interim government, because whoever gets into power next, obviously won't be voted in. This is somebody who would have assumed power. It's a coup, really. My take is that then, Geza and his people, then they should be saying to us how, on what terms that person is running the country. If it's an interim government, what are they hoping to achieve, and what institutions they're willing to strengthen? Like you said, the courts, our election boards, and the police. And there should be tangible outcomes in terms of how we know we've reached, what we are achieving to do. That's going to be like one of the biggest issues, because if you're going to put an interim government there and say we're going to have elections going on, but then it becomes a chance for whoever it is that's in power at the time to then install his own people. Say, like what Nangagwa clearly did, and then Chiringa does the same thing, replaces the judges and everybody that he are on his team. We're not going anywhere, because we find ourselves in the same situation time and again. So an interim government should be formed of the opposition and every sort of interested parties, including sort of SADC, so that we can strengthen our own institutions before we can then say, look, let's go for elections. That's the only way around this. Otherwise, they should let Mnangagwa finish his term. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to